right, welcome to the Obvious Podcast. This is episode number 85. My name is Sonny Macon. I'm the COO at ABC Florida East Coast.
And I'm Peter Daiga, President and CEO at ABC Florida East Coast.
You're listening or watching the Obvious Podcast, where all opinions expressed are our own, or our guests, or unless we say otherwise.
Love the show? Subscribe on any major podcast platform or watch us in action on YouTube. Follow the Obvious Podcast on Instagram, X, and True Social, and now on TikTok. All the links you need are in the show notes. And you can reach out to us anytime at theobvious@abceastflorida.com. And if you're enjoying the ride, help others find us by leaving a review wherever you listen. Happy Friday, Sonny.
Another Friday.
Another Friday, another show.
It's
number 2 in our communication series.
Communication series, yeah.
All right, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Our series now, all on one topic. So,
all related.
Speaking of communication, you all should have already received, when I say you all, I mean our members, should have already received our 2025 Year in Success in the mail. We'll also be happy to email you a PDF or an electronic version.
Yep.
But why is this related to communication? Well, this is just one of the many ways we try to communicate. Delivering value that's tied to the mission given us by our volunteer leaders and our board of directors. Hopefully, this is a just spectacular summary of the many different ways in which we are fulfilling the mission given us and the value that we're delivering.
And the impact.
And to tie in last week's, being tied to a single mission.
Yeah.
Is part of the prerequisites, as we kind of spelled out it last week, I think, to being successful and
100%.
And also, avoiding conflicts of interest, where you might just be interested in one little aspect of what we do and ignore the others, or worse, think that the others aren't necessarily tied to delivering value.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway.
Well, before we get into that, I do want to, Mr. Producer quarterback this whole effort. And it's not easy because there's a lot this organization does. There's a lot of data we generate. There's a lot of people involved. There's a lot of departments involved.
And as big as it is in Thorough, you have limited space, right?
We do have limited space.
To make decisions about what to include and what not to include.
And we were able to sell advertising this year, which makes me very, very happy.
Yep, that's a first. So, help defray the cost. Great job.
I know the demands to have you on camera.
T-minus, 8 months before we start thinking about the next one or something like that. So it's crazy.
Actually, I think Mr. Producer and I had our first conversation in November of 24 for this, right? November of
25.
I'm sorry, November 25 for this book.
To start to talk about it.
Yep. Yeah. So start putting our stuff together. So it's impressive. I'm just going to hold up the cover again because I think it's so beautiful.
Please, you should have received it already, but we ask you to take a look at it, share it. So
it's also on our homepage,
which is www.abceastflorida.com. abceastflorida.com.
It's a great little capture of everything this organization does, and I'm sure I'll read through this and I'll realize we forgot something.
So always, So our series on communication.
Yes,
Sonny.
Last week we talked about the pilot rescue out of Iran and how when you don't share a common mission, the communication always falls apart, and you have sort of the cascading series of effects.
I thought that analogy was brilliant.
Thank you.
For a lot of people, that's gonna make sense.
Right. I hope so.
Part of the reason the military is so successful is because they have a unified mission.
Yep.
They communicate and have clearly, all the way down to just making sure you understand the words precisely, not just being behind the mission.
You look how to do the time, right? Like even the 24-hour
time and the NATO phonetic alphabet or whatever,
Alpha, Zulu, all that,
So everything about it is about trying to communicate in clarity and mission. So
today I thought we would talk about the complete opposite of mission-driven organizations, which would be our government, right? And
that could be I don't know,
because I really don't know what
old socialists might think that's the best central planning and communication. So why do you say it's
with the exception of Bernie Sanders? I find that everything that the government does, it is so profoundly problematic. And I don't know, Milton Friedman said this or somebody said this. government creates nothing. It just consumes and creates, well, that's not true. They do create obstacles and problems. But the reason I was thinking about the opposite of the effectiveness or the mission-driven nature of the military is I was thinking about the TSA agents who weren't getting paid, and just the effect that had on air travel and the hours and the lines that were out the door. I mean, it happened here, and Fort Lauderdale is not a large airport, and you have people literally standing outside of the main terminal building.
And when we talked about this beforehand, I'm really excited about talking this in terms of our government.
Yeah.
Right. But I want to start a little bit by just thinking. I don't want pushing back. It's maybe not the right term, but wouldn't some leftists, you might say the Chinese government is like the equivalent of military. They're unified in mission. They communicate well. I mean, would not some leftists say no? I mean, a communist government, or the more controlled economy, or the more controlled you get, dictatorships, or maybe even. But we talked about.
You could argue that point. You could argue that point.
How? So then, and this scares me a little bit. The people that have often said our form of government is, it's awful. Because it doesn't allow.
It doesn't allow.
It doesn't allow. But that's relatively new too, though, right? You and I were talking beforehand about, I don't know when this happened, but we don't really even seem to have a unified mission anymore.
All right. So let's go back to the 80s.
Theories.
Let's go back to the 80s. We were very determined.
Because without that unified mission, that's when the government and its ability to deliver the kind of things that people who believe in limited government it should deliver, they can't even do that well. Can't even do airport security well. We can't even agree on funding law enforcement.
Right.
As a country, we don't even have that as a common mission anymore.
I know. I mean, I saw a headline recently on the news that they were considering privatizing the TSA. And I'm old enough to remember 9/11. The whole reason the TSA came into being was because
of 9/11.
Because of 9/11, because airport security was privatized.
And by the way, I even remember, I'm old enough to remember that political or legislative argument. And Bush was president, and he pushed back about nationalizing, if you will, or federalizing TSA. And he eventually acquiesced. I mean, it was a battle royale.
Yeah.
Because prior to that, it was privatized. There were some arguments made, yes, we need to step up the security of airports, but can it be done through the system we had before? Or do we need to turn it over to the government? And for a long time, Republicans or right of center push back, and they end up acquiescing and giving up. So, and today we have
an argument.
Now, I was corrected, by the way, and I actually did some research and found out that actually airports are allowed to privatize. They can, if they meet certain criteria.
Each airport itself.
Each airport can independently ask to be released, if you will, from the federal aspect of this and privatize it. They still have to, much like an example that kind of rung for me was, even though we're a state apprenticeship advisory council state or a SAC state, it doesn't mean that the Bureau of Apprenticeship Training and the Department of Labor doesn't approve the standards. We still have to meet federal standards. It's like a lot of things, right? You still have to meet the standards even if they're not the ones with the direct oversight, and so it's very similar. You can privatize, and I looked, I think, or the Orlando airport might be one of them.
Kansas City is one, because one of my best friends lives in Kansas City.
So they're not TSA agents. They're private. They have to. So apparently it's there, and I'm quite frankly, I'm hoping this makes more of them look at privatizing, because you can't go on living like this, right? Anyway, back to the communication part.
So
in our series, and the
communication point,
being unified around a mission, and
so we clearly are not unified in what the mission of the federal government is, right? Now, your point about China is a spectacular point, because every Chinese person, certainly in China, understands that the goal of the government is to create Chinese supremacy worldwide, right? Whether it's military, navy, economic, manufacturing, AI, they want the Chinese to be. And you could argue, if you do enough research,
I don't know really. I mean, that's true?
Yeah.
Every Chinese citizen understands that.
They understand that the whole goal of.
And is the motive behind that national pride, or is it more of a race thing?
Well, it's. I don't want to get in trouble, but it's a race thing because the Han, who are the ethnic sort of Chinese, I don't know if you know this, but the mainland China and like the people of Hong Kong. So the Han's native tongue is Mandarin. And then there's and I can't even think of the name of the people group, but Hong Kong used to be, they spoke Cantonese. And they banned Cantonese. They really only want you to speak Mandarin. And so the idea is that the Han dynasty, the Han people are really convinced that they are the global supremacists and everything they do
That's pretty important to understand because, hence they're unified around a mission,
around a mission.
as you said, of
Absolutely.
dominating in every aspect.
And of course, they have outliers and things like that. So they've created this whole system that they call their social credit score. They give you a social credit score. So if you kind of wander away from the strict party line, you're punished. And then, it can be as obviously it can be as significant as jail time, but they could also be like you can't use public transportation or your children don't go to the best schools. I mean, there's all sorts of things they have found to punish you if you kind of wander off the path.
So speaking of unified missions
Yeah.
and minimizing conflicts of interest,
Yep.
right? Because if anybody gets one, they're like brought back on, right?
They're brought back on.
So you could argue that that's like so really what this boils down to, and I'm not sure this is where we intended to go with this, but it's a fascinating conversation. It's a struggle between perhaps that good goal of being unified around a mission and being able to deliver on it, provided that mission is an admirable one, versus freedom.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
That's a very fair comment. Yep. Versus freedom.
Because that's what we're trying to do in this great experiment in the United States is balance and freedom, but also, and again, I think it worked when, and again, I don't know that it was an intent of this segment of our communication series, but when did that change? When did that start to deteriorate? When did we go from being a democracy or a representative democratic republic, that had a more unified mission as a people? And so it worked with that great balance of freedom. And now it seems to be very problematic. We were joking, beforehand. We can't even agree on.
Yeah, whether we exist to serve American citizens or illegal aliens.
Right, we can't even agree on that.
We can't even agree on that. And this is our government that can't agree on this. Forget the people. I mean, I think the people agree mostly. I think the demarcation.
We can't agree to take a more current issue, although it's a few weeks back now, on whether it's a good thing or not that 250 or something companies in China are in the business of taking pregnant women right at the end of their pregnancy to the United States
to the US,
to have their kid and then fly them and their kid back. And we can't even agree because there are people arguing that there's nothing wrong with that. The lead attorney for the ACLU, and there are people in our culture that think that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That is nuts. I mean, we can't agree on some very basic things anymore, and it's problematic to a point of when you don't have you can't coalesce around a mission anymore. Is it any wonder that then conflicts of interest, go berserk, and that you're not able to deliver, anymore? How many weeks now or months have we been without TSA being funded? So,
and in the best of circumstances, politicians are drowning in conflicts of interest. In the best of circumstances, in a situation like this, when you literally can't agree on anything, and I feel like this is the direction where a president comes, a bunch of executive orders get issued. You have one policy for 4 years or 8 years. The next president comes, all that stuff gets rescinded, and the policy completely changes. And it's like you cannot progress as a country if that's how you behave. And you certainly can't communicate, right? But I feel like that, I don't know how you ever get it back. I think it's broken, like beyond. So I've heard a lot of people argue that during the Cold War, and you would have a better understanding of this than I would, but during the Cold War, the world was very clear. Like, okay, this is who we need to defeat. Our freedom, our way of life, it all depends on this. And if it doesn't happen, it's gone. And I feel like that sort of purpose, mission it's been not even chipped away, it's been destroyed. And now We can't even agree on what an American is. We can't even agree on the fact that I remember years ago there was a movie called Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith, right? The whole premise of that movie was you can come to this or you can be in this country, you can work your tail off and be successful, and nobody can stop you, right? And because it's literally in our, is it in the preamble or in the Constitution? You know, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And
The pursuit.
part, right? Like now, it's like people want universal basic income.
Right.
Forget the pursuit. No, just give it to me. And it's like, I can't, I mean, it's been what, 30 years since the Cold War ended? 30 years? 40 years? I can't believe how fast this country has just dramatically changed and fragmented. And half the country sees the world in a way that is completely the opposite of how the other half sees it. And that's I think the politicians are really a remnant of that. I think they are a reflection of that. I think the politicians are just like, okay, what's best for me in my career, and I'll just sort of do that. And so I don't understand how you ever overcome this. And I think that is a significant communication problem and understanding problem.
Well, our
It's a
system.
worldview problem.
Yep, absolutely. Our system, you know, the only way to overcome it is the voters have got to send a very strong message and a consistent one. And they're not there yet.
Oh, no, they're very inconsistent.
Very inconsistent, back and forth and whatnot. And it's interesting because I think there's still some, speaking of communication, they might communicate well, but they're not necessarily communicating honestly. Right. I think some people in our system. Any event, fascinating conversation that we could probably have another whole episode on.
They called Reagan the great communicator, right? Obama is a phenomenal communicator. Biden is a terrible communicator. I could argue that, you know, Trump's not a very good communicator. And they all pay a price for it. So if you can't communicate well, but this country is so schizo, you could be a great communicator and be a terrible president, then they'll love you for it.
Right. Well, again, I think that the problem today is you have, you know, you might think if you just looked on the surface that there are some things we did have a unified mission about because both sides talk about, for example, the threat to democracy.
Right.
You know.
Right.
You know, but the interesting thing is if you actually look at actions, you know, behind your words, it's like, well, which side is actually being critical, if you will, of, let's just take some international episodes where democracy is on the march as opposed to retreat. Venezuela, you know, for one, you know, where removing a drug lord and a dictator who most of the world acknowledged the last election was not democratically elected. Okay, so if you're really for democracy, you would think we would be unified behind that. So, but if you look at U.S. politics, everybody says they're for democracy. Because this one side will say you're destroying it, and the other side will say, no, you're destroying it. But the real question is not that we're unified in our words. The question is, will the American public at some point recognize you got to look beyond words, you know? And again, here is where I think the media, you know, plays a particular nasty role, I think, in all this, and lack of communication. But then the other thing that's confusing or troubling to me is like, you know, we live in an age where fewer people get their news from those traditional sources. They're getting it from internet sources and other things, and yet it doesn't seem to have helped in the clarity, if you will, in terms of.
Not at all. Yeah.
Is this at all getting at the round two of the communication?
No, exactly. You know? So again, connection is the mission, right? And the methodology, and you will never ever agree on the methodology if there's no clarity on the mission and there's agreement on the mission. So I think so I'm sorry we're not ending this on a hopeful note because I mean, I'm certainly not hopeful for where we're headed as a nation in terms of how we coalesce around.
But I don't know if we rang the bell, but the overall lesson, you know, we were talking about is the fact that to be successful and to be good communicators is to be able to coalesce around a unified mission. And the point we're trying to make is it seems less and less that we as a nation, as a people, are coalesced around a mission. And the problem that's going to be for delivering on any kind of a mission.
And what's scary to me, I'm going to take what you just said to the next level. What's scary to me is that political disagreements are now finding their way into much more micro disagreements.
Sure.
Right?
Right.
Like Like I know when it comes to personal dating and stuff, liberal women are like, and conservative men, I mean, they're completely on different platforms. Like women are like, nope, if you voted for Trump, not interested, right? If you're MAGA, not interested. If you're right wing, not interested. If you're a Republican, not interested. And now you're seeing the men start to reflect that, because men didn't used to care what women's politics were, but now it's like, oh, if you got a blue hair, I'm not interested, right? Like you're starting to see sort of those disagreements reflected in everyday life. And then eventually you'll see that in boardrooms. You'll see that amongst board of directors. Like if you're somebody on the left of the political aisle or you're on the right, that conflict's going to be reflected.
And that's the point of all this, is that as an organization or any organization or association, some of them do better than others, have a very clear mission. They review it regularly and they recommit to it, which I think we're very good at, which I think is part of the reason for our success. But if you get away from that, or you get away from being unified behind it, or you let your conflict of interest where you see only one aspect of that is really delivering on it and you don't see the full picture, what we're seeing in the country could very much come to the boardroom.
Exactly. So if you want to see the full picture, ask for this. All right. Thank you very much for joining us.
Tell us your favorite part. We'd love to hear from you. All right.
So thank you for listening and honoring us with your time. We look forward to sharing another episode next Friday.
And as always, for comments, send us an email at theobvious@abceastflorida.com. Until next time. Ciao.